keep asking for money every single day, $5, and I'm just trying to figure out how are we gonna go about this. I thought you're a millionaire, you're a billionaire, whatever, but you keep asking for $5 every single day, man. So
Yeah,
I
listen,
don't know what to
Alex,
say, bro.
I need to apologize on behalf of my associate here. He's new at the company. He's still an intern. He's still learning. There's this whole thing where he needs to borrow like $5 from me. He says he'll pay me back in 2 weeks. He never pays me back. So this is a
Wow.
bit of an ongoing issue. I need to apologize on behalf of my associate
Alex, are
here.
you hearing this, man? You heard the guy 2 seconds before, right? But it's all good, man.
All lies.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for joining in. We got 2,000 people watching, man. At one point, we're gonna get to 1 million. We got Alex from Hadron. We're excited. We're gonna talk about a bunch of stuff. And yeah, man. What are we?
Well,
Brendan,
look,
what are we saying, man?
yeah, so first I should probably, in all seriousness, say that, look, hey, folks, Alex here, the founder of Hedron, is launching his protocol, I believe, very soon here. At least the mint function, I believe, is launching tomorrow. So lots of exciting stuff. Hedron is a super interesting protocol that we'd like to learn more about. But before we delve into kind of the nuance of what Hedron's all about, I'd like to ask first a little bit about you, Alex. So how did you get interested in crypto in the first place? Tell us about yourself.
I'm not particularly interesting, but I work. Work.
That's a lie. Everyone's interesting.
But I just worked in IT, and working with computers, you hear about crypto and stuff like that, and got into it in like 2016 ish. Lost a ton of money. Went back in, lost a ton of money. Found Richard Hart. Stopped losing money.
Right.
Once you listen to what he says, a lot of the stuff he says makes sense, and you're like, oh, wow, I was doing some very stupid stuff. But yeah, watched him, followed him, and then saw his HEX project, and I was like, yeah, I'll give this thing a try, and been in since day one.
How far back was that?
What's that, like December 2019 when HEX launched?
I see.
December 12th, I think.
Wow.
Don't quote me on that.
Okay. And let me ask you something. Are you into any other projects other than HEX? I know might be controversial, but are you just HEX only mostly?
I dabble here and there when I see interesting things, but right now, in this kind of like bearish market that we're in, I'm basically all in HEX, PulseX, and then obviously my own project, Hedron. So
I understand. Right. So no Shiba, Floki, Inu.
You're not on Shiba or Dogecoin, man? Is that what you're telling us right now?
Yeah, not neither of those. I was.
That's crazy.
If you want to get technical, I was in Shiba for a brief second.
Oh, someone's gonna clip that. See, it's gonna be used against you.
You're canceled, man. But maybe also, if that's the case, I guess so. You're focused on the Pulse chain or the Richard Hart ecosystem, and obviously you have you're looking into Hadron right now and all that. Why Hadron? What started the idea? What did you find within the system that you're like, this was gonna add to the system? This is what we're looking for. Obviously every single ecosystem has some sort of I don't want to say weakness or certain gaps that could be filled by other projects. What's yours? What's Hadron? And why should people be interested in it?
Well, so if you look at HEX, right? HEX is heavily gatekept, first of all. It's not listed on any centralized exchanges. I don't think it's ever going to be listed on a centralized exchange. And I think it's largely to do with its liquidity. Its liquidity is low all the time, and exchanges make money on fees. Just not a good value proposition for an exchange to list HEX. They probably will lose money doing it. So unless something drastically changes, I don't think we're ever going to see HEX on a centralized exchange. And additionally, you have a lot of people who have become multi-millionaires through HEX. It's performed very well for a lot of people. So you have two, I won't say they're necessarily problems with HEX. They're just really problems with the environment. And that is, one, if you become a multimillionaire, right? What is the strategy you see in the fiat world that people like to adopt to be able to actually use that liquidity somewhere? Well, they typically will lock it up, and they will typically find a way to borrow against it at a lower rate than whatever it's appreciating at. So they're still net positive all the time, but now they have some liquidity that they can use in the real world. So Hedron exists to solve that part of the market. It also exists to bring HEX to other users that it otherwise can't reach currently. One of those is the NFT marketplace. So one thing Hedron allows you to do is you can actually encapsulate a HEX stake into an NFT token and throw that on OpenSea, Wearable, wherever you want, and you're actually trading the real HEX stake. Like that token's directly redeemable for the stake. So now you have these high value NFT tokens that you can take to these marketplaces, and 20% of all Ethereum traffic is on OpenSea. So there's a lot of people there. And if you're going to market to someone, like, what's the hardest part about marketing HEX to people? Well, MetaMask is hard to install. They don't know anything about DeFi or Uniswap or all this stuff. Like, trying to go through that process with someone who has no idea what you're talking about, difficult. But everyone on OpenSea, they already have MetaMask. They already have Ethereum. They already have USDC. You can put HEX stakes right in front of them. And, what do you do on OpenSea? You look at, like, what NFTs are trading for the most money.
Right.
And so, like, if you have HEX stakes leading that, and 20% of all Ethereum users are there, and they're already primed to buy, like, it's a great marketing system.
Who or what will determine the front face or the logo or the picture of a Hadron HEX stake on OpenSea?
So like, I guess that would be us, right? Because it's our smart contract. We get
It would be the Hadron protocol itself. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, right. So you get to choose the
pick what
branding.
logo. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We actually already have that done. It's in our Telegram if anyone wants to have a
Oh.
sneak peek.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll put the
Yeah.
Telegram address to that in the bottom. But maybe another question, I guess, maybe a follow-up question is, so was this mainly the purpose was to obviously to hack a newer audience that could possibly get into HEX, but because of the obstacles in the way in terms of education, how to onboard new people and all of that, there's a new kind of shortcut to access the NFT marketplace so you can bring on people to Hadron, to HEX and Hadron. And I guess that's from the marketing side of things. So but there's also utility aspect of things as well. Maybe if you can touch upon that a bit. Is Hadron mainly, let's say, for example, aimed towards new user adoption, or is it more like it has an actual use case for the Hexican community or HEX holders in general, or whatever the case might be?
Well, I think it has both. And that's kind of the interesting dynamic. So if you want to, like, just the TLDR on the features, if you're an existing Hexican and you already have stakes, Hedron will let you just mint Hedron tokens for free. If you have, it's based upon how many B shares your stakes have and how many days you've served within them. But you can just have access to free Hedron tokens for holding your stakes and actually serving time within them. And that's an incentive to get people to, one, emergency and stake a little bit less, be a little bit less stupid, which helps the HEX price. We have less sell pressure. Additionally, it's using that model as like a liquidity seed, right? Because on the other side of this coin, you're going to have a pseudo lending system. I like to call it an advance, because you have a certain amount of Hedron you're allowed to mint against the HEX stake. It's determined on its stats. And you actually have to serve the stake to completion to get all of it. Every day it accumulates a little bit more free Hedron tokens. The advanced system, which is kind of like the borrowing side, will give it all to you up front on the condition that you pay it back over time with a small fee. And everything you pay back, including the fees, is burnt. So your role in the system is to deflate the system and pump everyone else's bags. So these two systems are kind of like directly opposed at each other. And the interesting dynamic that happens here is you seed all this liquidity out, and you have this borrowing system that has major tax advantages for people who have made significant money in HEX. And you have this interesting duality where you're minting on one side, but the borrowers want to buy your tokens because they need to be able to make their repayments and all that kind of stuff. And then you combine that with the encapsulated stake side, where you throw these things on NFT marketplaces, and there's some restrictions there, right? Like, you can't go take a loan out and then go send your loaned stake to a marketplace and sell it, right? It's like you're going to be a little restricted in what you can do. But being able to put these on marketplaces and speculate on the future price performance of stakes brings a whole new dynamic to HEX exposure. It brings a whole new dynamic to how we can interact with HEX as a protocol.
I see. Is there a reason why you chose to include the time served in your hex stake as to how much Hadron you can mint? Does that
Well,
make
yeah,
sense?
sure. Because if you could just mint it all like without the time served component, well, you could just mint it and then end your stake. Then you got all your Hedron. You know, there's no incentive for you to keep the stake. So what Hedron's basically doing is turning your hex stake into a Hedron miner of sorts, right? Every day it's going to generate more and more Hedron at some kind of fixed rate, based on its stats, right? But it's encouraging you to not get rid of that stake. Because to have the borrowing component, you have to have free liquidity being emitted into the system for other people to use to make these repayments. Because everything they pay back is going to get destroyed by the contract.
So you kind of need this inflation entering the system for people to be able to borrow or pay off loans.
Yeah.
So could we flush out a little bit more why there's this borrowing feature with Hadron? What is the function? What is the purpose of that?
The biggest one, like if you want to talk about like design intentions, it's largely because in most jurisdictions, anything that's classified as a loan, and you kind of have to like do some digging on the legal definition of that. And this isn't tax advice, not a tax or financial advisor, but
100%.
The Hedron borrowing system was designed to basically meet every possible country I could find's definition of a loan. And the reason that's beneficial is because those are not taxed. So if you have a hex stake that's accrued millions of dollars, and let's say you've built this in Hedron, because Hedron will only allow you to do this with the encapsulated stakes, but you've put this in Hedron, it's $1 million stake, and you can borrow. I don't know what the actual US dollar value of what you'd be able to borrow, but let's say it's 100, 200 grand, and you can go out in the real world and use this liquidity and essentially spread the taxes out over, say, all 15 years of the stake instead of all at once when you end the stake. Because the only taxable event when you're borrowing is the repayment. Potentially. Like if you're buying. So like here's like the interesting thing, right? Because you have minting and borrowing in Hedron, you can actually have two stakes. One you mint and one you borrow, and you just use one stake to pay the other. So you never have to go to market to buy the tokens to repay. And that's a strategy people have come up with for zero risk borrowing.
Okay. Now, I think it might also be important to mention, so correct me if I'm wrong, but is Hadron itself used to buy and sell these encapsulated stakes?
So only in one condition. So if you take the NFTs and you go to OpenSea, it's whatever currency they let you use, right? They're Ethereum and USDC, and I think Rarible lets you use more. But there's an interesting way in which Hedron can be used, and that is, let's say you borrow against a hex stake, right? And something happens, for whatever reason, you don't repay within 90 days. Or I should say you don't make any payments within 90 days, because it will break what you're borrowing down into 30-day payment chunks. So if you go 90 days and you've not made any payments, you will be able to be liquidated. Doesn't necessarily mean like the contract's not going to do it to you automatically, but you'll show up on a list to people. Hey, you can liquidate this guy. And what happens with that is someone looks at the list, they see your stake performance stats, and they're like, yeah, okay, I'll liquidate this guy. They press liquidate. That starts a 24-hour auction where anyone can come in and just bid the highest amount of Hedron that they're willing to pay for that stake.
So, yes, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so like that is like the one way you can purchase a stake with Hedron, and Hedron's the only currency accepted is in that liquidation setup.
Okay, so if I'm sorry to interrupt, you finish off if I'm interrupting.
Let the guy speak, man. Let him finish.
I just got so many questions. My bad. Please finish.
No, you're good. Yeah, I was done.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, no, I mean, I have a bunch of questions. So just so if I'm understanding correctly, so let's say you want to you'd borrow some Hadron, maybe for tax purposes. You could then use that Hadron to take out a encapsulated stake. And then if you, and again, butt in whenever I'm wrong here. And then let's say you take out that encapsulated.
Okay, sorry. If you want me to butt in, then we'll
please. Yeah.
So you have to make the encapsulated stake first.
Okay.
Right? You have to have some hex. You're going to make the encapsulated stake, and that will enable you to borrow against it.
I see. Okay, so you have some hex. You create your encapsulated stake. You borrow against it, and you borrow Hadron. and let's say you don't pay that Hadron back, you will have maybe 30-day increments in order to pay that back. After 90 days, if you don't do so, your Hadron loan can potentially be liquidated. And then what happens to that liquidated Hadron loan?
So you get to keep whatever Hedron you were given, right? Like it's not the contract's not going to make you give that back or destroy it anyway. But the hex stake's going to be, assuming someone liquidates you, which they probably will. They're going to start an auction, and the second they start that auction, it's going to remove that stake from your control. So you no longer have the stake, and people are going to bid on that stake back and forth until the highest bid is met, and then once that person wins the auction, they actually get control of the stake.
Would Hadron ever be able to control those stakes whatsoever? Let's say the market didn't want to either liquidate the guy or the person that's actually encapsulating that stake. Is there some sort of a protocol owned hex encapsulated stakes that eventually happens or something like that?
I not built into the protocol. So there's a source address which is analogous to the origin address in hex, and it does get a copy of the bonuses. So there's a launch bonus and the AMR bonus. The AMR bonus is a little complicated, but it will receive copies of those. So there's a couple scenarios. Maybe the source address does something like maybe there's a bunch of liquidated stakes sitting there that are just clogging up the system and making it more expensive for everybody to use. Maybe it cleans some of those out. Maybe it burns. I don't. There's a lot of possibilities for this. What the source address might do, but realistically, I think, if there's a situation where nobody wants to liquidate the stake, they just won't. And then you got to get a free ride, right? I mean, you won't be able to end the stake until you've paid it back. But if no one's going to liquidate you because they think it's a stupid stake and they don't want to waste the time on it, then it just sits there.
So maybe I guess so. For the people that are listening, if we just maybe zoom out for a bit, we got a bit technical with how Hadron works and all that. Let's say I'm your average person coming in to the system, to the ecosystem. I learned about HEX, and I learned about that there's this other project where I can encapsulate my HEX instead of going into the HEX main system or the main protocol and actually stake my HEX tokens for whatever period of time. If you just a simple, I guess, bullet points. I got two choices: either go with Hadron or go with HEX. Why would I go with either or? And I guess that depends on what I'm looking for, right? So if you can just maybe go over that a bit, just a quick summary of why would we go to Hadron or why would someone go to HEX instead?
Sure. So I think this is kind of a little complicated process, but I'll dumb it down as much as I can.
You got all the time in the world, man.
So you go through HEX, right? You're just gonna take your HEX, you're gonna create a stake, and it's gone. Cannot be moved. The stake is permanently attributed to your wallet, and at some point it'll end, and you'll get your HEX out of it, or you'll emergency end stake. One of the two, right? With that thing you've done in HEX, Hedron will allow you to mint free tokens. So you can do that regardless of whether you make the stake in HEX or Hedron. The minting feature exists for both sides.
Okay.
So if that's the only thing that's interesting you, you're like, I just want to get my free tokens and speculate on those, you can just make a regular HEX stake. If you want the other features of being able to encapsulate the stake or do the borrowing side, then you'll have to do it in Hedron. Now, you may not want to sell your stake. Like one of the things people think happens a lot is that everyone's going to do this to like sell stakes in the market. I actually don't think they will. I think some will and some won't. But one of the benefits you get by encapsulating is just the ability to move a stake to a new wallet. Right? You believe you've done something sketchy with your wallet's compromised, or maybe you just want to buy a new Ledger or Trezor or something. You want to change seeds up. There's a lot of reasons you might choose to do that. Like that's a useful feature to people, just to be able to move a stake. Additionally, you can get the lending side. Additionally, you get the ability to trade them on the NFT marketplaces. So it's really kind of just a divide of like, what features do you want? If you want to be able to move stakes around, borrow or trade them as NFTs, you're going to be looking at the encapsulated side. And that's going to cost a little bit more to create those stakes than on the regular hex side because you're doing extra contract work, right?
Right.
You're wrapping it in another contract. So it's about double the cost of creating a normal hex stake, and then end stake's about the same, really, not a big difference.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah, so it's really just about features and gas fees.
Right.
I see.
Okay. Apologies for continually interrupting. I got so many questions because there's so many threads I want to pick on it. I don't even know where to start. Okay, so look,
a little bit of a mind blower, unfortunately.
yeah, and there's so many features. So that's what I want to better understand here. So we touched on a couple different features of Hadron, but if we wanted to maybe briefly summarize the tokenomics, the features of the Hadron token, what you can do with it, how would you go about doing that?
I would say the things you can do with the Hedron token are, number one, if the idea of being able to bid on hex stakes that eventually find their way into liquidations, and I would personally like there not to be liquidations, but I already know there's people in the Telegram who purposely intend to put hex stakes in the liquidations just because they want to see Hedron get burnt. You know, they have a big bag and they want to see everyone else burn all their Hedron and they can keep their big bag. So I'm sure there will be some in there at some point. So one use case of the token is obtain a lot of it and go to these liquidation auctions and try to participate that and get some hex stakes. Another use case is people are going to want to purchase that off of you, like just being able to put on the free market and you know there are guaranteed buyers on the other side, because they have to pay back their loans. And then the other side of this would be actually not minting. Like this is kind of the weird side theoretical game theory stuff people come up with in the chat, right? But there's two reasons to not mint in the first place. One is that there's this thing called the AMR bonus. It's not really a bonus, as more of it's like a ratio fixer. It's like if you have a situation where everyone borrows and nobody mints, well, eventually everyone gets liquidated because there isn't enough free market Hedron for these people to buy to repay. So the free market Hedron, like you need that to exist. So the AMR bonus comes into effect to incentivize people to mint. So if more than 50% of the total supply of Hedron becomes borrowed, so let's say it's 51%, it starts throwing bonuses at people. Like, hey, if you mint today, you can get like a 30x bonus. So it's designed to incentivize these people to mint, to rebalance the scales so that you don't have a situation where everyone gets liquidated. So not minting in the first place, like if you just kind of sit there and wait, you maximize the potential of that happening. Because if you mint, it fixes the scale. If you don't mint, then potentially maybe people borrow, and you're not participating in the other side.
So nobody mint.
Yeah, that's a strategy some people have. I don't think everyone will follow that, but it's an interesting one. The other one is that when you're actually selling encapsulated stakes, the unminted Hedron goes with it. So if you create an encapsulated stake, and this is kind of like a premium driving factor for the secondary market, because the last thing I want to see is these stakes trade at such a significant discount that, it becomes more incentivized to buy an old stake than make a new one. It's the last thing I want to see happen. So if you have an encapsulated stake, you serve 5 years into it, it has the right to mint a bunch of tokens. But if you don't mint it, when you sell it as the NFT, all the unminted tokens go with it, and the right to mint them in the future at a rate that no one else can do anymore also goes with it.
Interesting. Okay, because I've heard you mention that you would like to have these encapsulated stakes stake at a premium, and because this is a really important thing you just said, so I'm going to hover on it for a second. So you're saying that the way you might achieve this premium for these wrapped HEX Hadron stakes is because you'll have the added value with these wrapped stakes to mint more Hadron, which should theoretically have these things trade for a premium. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons a HEX stake would trade for a premium in my estimation. Like one is the share price is better back then, right? Like, what would you pay for T-shares from 2 years ago?
Right.
Probably a lot you would pay today for those.
Right. Yeah.
So like you have that component. You have all the inflation that a stake has accrued in that time. That's valuable. And now we're just adding two extra things. Now it's all the unminted Hedron and the rights to mint it in the future.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of things that kind of go into an encapsulated stake being worth quite a lot on the secondary market. Now, it may end up being a discount from what you end it for. But I think there's some nuance here that a lot of people get confused on. Because saying it's a discount is kind of ambiguous. Like, are you saying it's a discount from compared to making a new stake today? Or are you saying it's a discount for what its value would be in the future when it actually ended? And it's definitely going to be a discount for that, right? For the value when ended, you're definitely going to be selling a discount compared to that. But at a discount of what you could make a brand new stake for today, I'm not so certain about that one. I think they'll trade above that rate.
Right. So now, in terms of encapsulating those stakes, can you encapsulate already existing stakes that are on the HEX protocol, or do you have to make that decision before you actually do or make your stake? Or in terms of just assuming you're going to encapsulate it at one point, you have to go through some sort of the Hadron protocol to actually do that stake, or can you stake on HEX and then later on I'm deciding that I want to encapsulate it, I want to use it on Hadron?
Yeah, no, you'll have to do it in Hedron. Once you create a stake through HEX, like, it's locked. It is never.
That's it.
Yeah, it cannot be moved from that address.
Okay, I see. Now, maybe for the people that obviously, there's a lot of buzz in the community about Hadron and all those things. We obviously do think there's a new maybe economy or a new version of how this whole system would work if we start incorporating how Hadron works and all that. The fact that you'd have to, or you'd go through Hadron first for you to actually, if you're deciding to encapsulate those. A lot of people are asking the question: is that going to affect the HEX, ecosystem? Is that going to affect how the T-shirts are working, or is that going to affect, the proposal of what HEX, value proposition is all about? How do you answer all those questions? What do you think is Hadron adding to that or taking away from it? And for the people that have those questions, what would you say?
I think, like, I'm going to quote Blue Bum on this. I don't know if you guys know Blue Bum, but he constantly says Hedron is rocket fuel for HEX. And the entire design intention of Hedron is to benefit HEX in every possible interaction. And it's not that hard to understand. Like, if you can get free tokens that let's say right now they don't have a value, right? It's not launched. And when it launches in about 6.5 hours, like, I don't know, they probably won't have a lot of value. It's brand new. But let's say some point they do have value. And you can get them for 100% for free just by staking HEX. What does that do to HEX's buy pressure? Probably increases buy pressure. If you are able to take people who would be emergency end stake dumpers and give them a way out by selling the HEX stake that has 0 HEX transactions to do, right? You're moving the stake from one person to another and they settle in USD SAC. Well, now you have no dump. And yeah, maybe you lose out on some emergency end stake fees, but emergency end stake fees make up less than 1% of the daily payout. You won't even notice that a couple people don't emergency end stake and you miss out on a couple of fees. So you're removing sell pressure, you're adding buy pressure on one side, you're giving people the ability to not have to sell their HEX in the first place in order to transact in the real world, where they can say, hey, I can design this so that I'm able to take these loans out and have low to 0 risk. And I can use that in the real world. I can dump Hedron. Hedron being a much more liquid coin, meaning that when those people dump, it has less effect on Hedron's price than it would on HEX's price. And so they're able to do that to get in the real world, but they never have to sell HEX to do it. Like, it's all about just removing all that sell pressure and then adding some buy pressure on the other side. And, the common argument is, okay, let's say these things do trade at like a significant discount and everyone's buying the old stakes, not making new ones. Well, eventually you're going to run out of old stakes. Like, at some point, that market has to bounce. I don't know where that point is, but it has to happen because you just won't be enough supply to do it.
Right. At some point, new stakes need to enter the system.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And additionally, on the other side of that, if this happens and you can buy these old stakes super cheap, I think we lose.
I think we lost Messon's camera here. I'll send you a wire transfer for $5.
Don't worry, man. I'm right here, man. Guys, we're still here, man. I just had to replace my battery, man. That's it.
No, it's okay. You're just interrupting the whole interview. It's fine.
I mean, my bad, man. My bad.
No, it's all good. It's all good. But look, Alex, if I can maybe interject a personal anecdote as well. Like, one reason why I think Hadron is personally interesting, because not just for all the reasons you mentioned, but I think it could also open the door to a whole new market, a whole new basket of people who wouldn't have otherwise staked Hex. Like, for example, me and Messi here, we've been talking about Hex quite a lot last couple months, and one of our biggest points of contention was the lockup feature for Hex, which a lot of people don't like, the fact that you're locked up for 15 years if you stake the max. What if what if an emergency happens? What if you need some money? But now that you're able to trade a 15-year hex stake, well, that would allow people to open up brand new 15-year long hex stakes with Hadron who wouldn't have otherwise, because they fear having a substantial portion of their life savings or their investments locked up for that long. So I think this also opens the door to a whole new marketplace of people who otherwise wouldn't have even opened up hex stakes in the first place if it weren't for this liquid feature that Hadron offers.
Right.
Well, and so this is actually a big contention point for Hedron, because a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people in Hex do not like that. You can essentially make this 15-year stake, get the longer pays better and bigger pays better bonus, right? And then just sell it off to somebody and walk away with some portion of the value. And the reality of that is you're walking away with almost no portion of the value, right? The person who's purchasing that stake is actually getting the hex at the end of it. Like, what happens when some guy pays $100,000 for a stake that cost another guy $1,000 to make? He's going to hold it. He's not going to sell it. He's not going to emergency unstake it. Like, whoever's sitting there purchasing these stakes is a diehard Hexagon. So it's a way for weaker hands to, number one, get out. And they have other options too. Like, I don't want the option to be like, oh, just go sell your stakes, because it's actually complicated. Like, you're going to have to mint the NFT. It's going to cost some gas. You're going to have to go to OpenSea, pay some gas there. They're going to charge like 2.5% to move the stake back and forth. Like, there's a lot of process and a lot of fees on that way. Versus if you just need some liquidity temporarily, it's like there's borrowing and minting. That's an option. So, I understand people's reservations. I understand why they think these things will be bad. But I think you end up in a situation where you see more hex locked over time because people are less scared of doing it now that they, maybe they're not going to actually sell their 15-year stakes. Maybe they're going to serve them to completion. But just the fact that they know they can, is a factor in them doing it. Additionally, you can market to so many more people, like a whole side of, like, here's the other thing. With this, like, you could go use a bridge like Wormhole. Granted, there's bridge risk using something like Wormhole. But if you have your hex stake as an NFT, you can go send them to Polygon if you want. There's a whole class of users on Polygon that we barely touch. Like, there's a hex ERC20 bridged over there right now, but you can put the NFTs there. You go to Arbitrum, you go to any of these layer 2s, and yeah, some of the layer 2s suck, and some suck less than others, and Pulse is definitely going to be probably better than all of them. But the point is, there are users there. There's people to adopt that you can get in with the system. And like that's the biggest thing with Polygon. You can't stake on Polygon. Sure, you can buy the ERC20. But if you can buy a stake on Polygon, well, can't you now technically stake on Polygon? Like, there's a lot of, like, there's a ton of ways you can reach more people with this. There's a ton of ways you make Hex more approachable. And throughout all of it, the Hex stays staked. It's not changing. Like, you're not emergency end staking, moving liquid Hex around, and then restaking. You are making a Hex stake, and it stays a stake until completion, one way or the other.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
So maybe one thing, I think at the end of the day, it's a free market. That's how I look at everything. Free markets will, you're going to have economies emerging or technologies emerging, or I guess, within DeFi and the Hex community, we're going to have new protocols emerging based on Hex, whether we like it or not, right? So that's always going to be there. One thing I would say is that you're obviously you're bringing a new type of customer to the Hex community, to the Hex ecosystem. That's pretty clear. I think, look, we're all the community stance on a lot of new projects is pretty clear as well. You know, there's a lot of hesitation when it comes to newer projects, and this is what we're trying to do on the channel. You know, bring in new people and see. You know, at the end of the day, we got to talk, we got to conversate and see whatever the positives that come in from Hadron, the negatives that come in from Hadron. The way I'm looking at things right now is that obviously you're bringing the new customer in, because usually either you are okay with all the penalties. You know, if let's say you want to come in, look, I want to maximize. If let's say if I have $1,000 that I want to put in now, I want to put it for, you know, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or whatever the case might be, just because of the penalties behind HEX and all that, you know, I'm only now comfortable with $200. However, if I knew that I can actually, you know, encapsulate my stake and I can trade it, let's say 2 years from now, I can, you know, I'm now more and more comfortable with putting the whole $1,000 in. So there's also that you're bringing into the equation, the new customer with more flexibility, regardless of whether Hex's value proposition was, you know, you gotta put your time in. You gotta put your time in, and that's pretty much it. So I do think it's just a matter of time until, you know, we start, whether it was Hadron or something else. At one point, the new projects based on HEX are going to come in. I think you're providing more utility to the HEX protocol. I think, you know, there's a new economy that's going to emerge. HEX, you know, HEX within an NFT marketplace that we don't even know how it's going to go, but we know it's just a toolless utility. Something's going to come up there, and there's some sort of equilibrium that we're going to reach. So it's pretty. I think it's pretty cool, man. To be honest with you, but obviously, the community is, the free market is going to decide regardless.
It's super interesting game theory, and look, man, I think I might have mentioned this before, but just to clearly state it, like I know someone like Messin is now going to be far more likely to open up a HEX stake where he wouldn't have otherwise, because I know one of your biggest things was, you know, I'm locked in for 15 years. You know, I'm locking up a substantial portion of my funds. You know, what if a family emergency? You know, people need their funds, and so like this opens the door to someone like you who wouldn't have opened up a HEX stake otherwise, but now with Hadron, is likely to. So it's interesting to kind of theorize. And I'm sure you've been thinking about game theory a lot for the last, I don't know how many months or maybe even years, as to will the benefits outweigh the potential negatives. You know, like I'm sure you've heard this a lot, but just so you can, for the audience watching now, you know, for those people who say you know, Hadron might detract from HEX buy pressure, what would you say to those people?
I would say, did Grayscale detract from Bitcoin's buy pressure?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, when you open up these new avenues, yeah.
Like think of it this way, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're in this situation where, like, if HEX is a certificate deposit, like if you just want to break everything down super simple, if HEX is supposed to be this blockchain certificate deposit, right? And that's, I forget the actual metric. It's hard to look up, like market caps for certificate deposits, but I believe it is like a trillion or something. But regardless, like when you have something like that, these kind of like lockup time value assets, what do banks do with them once they have them? What do governments do when they have them? They put all of these things in bonds. They sell the bonds to somebody else. Somebody else can, you know, have this guy's money for now. And yeah, maybe you get some coupon payments, and you know, maybe you borrow against the bonds. It's like, that's Hedron.
It's a representation of what's underlying the asset, basically.
Yeah, and it's a way of, sure, it's a way of people having weaker hands. That's inevitable, right? You know, I think you're going to see probably some people execute weaker hand behavior, but a lot of those will be people who weren't going to invest in HEX anyways.
Sure.
And as someone, if you have strong hands and you're like, I want to lock up and serve my 15 years and delay gratification, if that is you, and I think more power to you if it is, like, you still benefit way more than the person who sells early.
Mm-hmm.
If you hold your stake to completion, you get more HEX, you earn more Hedron tokens for free. You don't even have to use the encapsulation to get that. You can just get that making a normal HEX stake. And, you know, you are benefiting more than the person who sells early.
Right. Now, there's so many questions I want to ask you. I want to hover on a technical point before I forget it here. I want to bring things back briefly to the AMR bonus, because I'm sure a lot of people, including myself, are really are going to consider that point a lot more, where you could choose to mint your Hadron as of tomorrow and maybe 6.5 hours, I think it was. But you said that if you choose not to, there may be this AMR bonus where you can get a substantial amount more. Now, have you, done any simulations or given any consideration to how often this AMR bonus might happen? Because let's say I choose not to mint my Hadron tokens. Well, I'd just be sitting on my unminted Hadron tokens for years, hoping and praying this is going to happen someday, where it never really happens. Or have you given any thought as to how often this could occur? Do you think this will happen maybe within the first 3 months, 6 months, a year? Just for the people, thinking about whether or not to mint their Hadron.
So, man, this is hard because I have no idea.
Okay.
There's no way to predict this,
Right.
because you have no idea how many people are actually going to mint their tokens. You have no idea people, like, what's the ratio of people who claim? Like, you kind of have two choices. You claim, which means I'm going to like get my launch bonus, but I'm not going to take my tokens right now. Or you have minting, which is like, yeah, I'm going to get my launch bonus and I'm going to take all I can get right now. A lot of those people probably will dump the ones on the minted side. Like, and then how many people borrow? Early on, probably not many, but maybe I'm wrong, because I have a lot of people in chat talking about how they're going to borrow on purpose and get liquidated. And if they do that, and then they get liquidated on day 90, all those people who are dumping are just going to take all that Hedron and throw it in liquidations, and then it's burnt. And then what's the ratio? Like, once all that is burnt, how much minted supply is left? Maybe a lot less. And maybe the borrowed supply is now bigger. And maybe now there's an AMR bonus. And additionally, there's a function in Hedrons. I get asked about it a lot. It's called the proof of benevolence function. All it does is burn tokens. So
Okay.
it's not exposed to the user interface. You have to go find it on Etherscan and use it. Maybe somebody uses that and burns a bunch of tokens. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Oh, hold on. Are we saying that? How do I get you to answer a question that you don't want to answer? Would the Hadron entity theoretically likely do that anytime soon?
The Hedron entity. Do you mean the source address?
Yes.
I have no idea. I mean, for all we know, Godwell will use it. Maybe Godwell's like, oh, I'm gonna trigger AMR. Because he'll have the power, right? Technically, he's got stakes big enough. He could mint so much of it, shoot the scales way off, let everyone do their borrowing games, and then he could burn if he wanted to. Like, anyone can technically use that function.
Right. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any possibility in the future for other kind of NFTs, any kind of, other staking protocols besides HEX that Hadron would be, welcome to, or something like that? Or is it this solely a HEX stakes protocol NFT?
So Hedron, the contract and everything that makes up of it is immutable. No admin keys, can't be changed. So it's only for HEX. Now, could someone do something similar on another project? Sure.
I see.
There can always be copycats, but there's going to be no changing Hedron after actually, even now, because the contract's actually already deployed on chain. It just has a time lock. So, there's no change in it.
I see. Now, I heard you also got audited. Your audit recently came out. Could you explain how that process went? Was it smooth? Did you have to, because I know sometimes there's some interesting back and forth between the developer and the auditor having to educate each other on what's going on. Could you explain how that process went for you?
Slow, painful.
A lot of emails, angry,
lots of back and forth.
I actually use Telegram predominantly, but you don't get to talk. It's like, here's the thing. Like, you talk to marketing people first. You're like, hey, I want an audit. And they tell you all these things. Like, oh, it's going to be this super process. Here's how we're going to do it. Please give us $40,000. So you're like, cool. Here's 40 grand. I'd like my audit, please. And then you give them your GitHub link and then wait a month. And then you get a response. And everything that they say in that response, wrong. Every single thing. They have no idea what your code does. They probably made an intern do it first. They had no idea. They'll be wrong about things that are like fundamental Solidity Ethereum things, right? So, and then you have to respond and be like, oh, what the hell is this? Who does this? And then they have the real guy do it after that, and then you get a better response, and then it's just a lot of back and forth. And unless there's a really major issue, generally you don't get to talk directly to the guy who's doing the audit.
Was there a major issue?
No, like if there's a major discrepancy, right? Like one of the discrepancies we had was, and it's something that's still marked incorrectly on the audit, in my opinion, but I just accepted it. They don't like the idea. It's like one of the things you do when you make payments, as I've described, is it burns wherever you pay, right? They would have liked it to use a function called burn from instead of burn. And the reason being is that burn from requires an approval. So I think that's from a user experience standpoint, that's horrible, because it would mean you would have to do an approval and a payment every time you wanted to make a payment. So that's 2 gas transactions. Every time you want to make one payment on a loan or do anything really that burn tokens. And you have to explain to them, why you're doing it the way you're doing it. And then sometimes they don't speak English, and there's a language barrier. So fortunately most of those were easily resolved, and they just agree. They're like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing there. That was one where they were like, no, we think burn from's always safer, they should always do an approve. And I'm like, my God, people would not want to use your smart contract.
Right.
But that's one that's going to just be unresolved on that audit forever.
Interesting.
But I don't care.
So it seems that there's usually game theory issues when it comes to this auditing process, where they don't really understand what you're trying to get at, the innovation aspect of it. It seems to be kind of a common thread.
They absolutely do not care at all about what you're trying to do.
They care safe or no
security. Yeah. Like if there is something you can do that is technically safer, they will dock you for it. Even if it means it would be horrible to actually use it.
Right. I see. And drive away users. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And if people want to find the audit, where can we find that?
It's on the webpage. If you go to hedron.pro.
Okay.
And then documentation tab, there'll be a thing that says audit there.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
So man, you're launching, within what we said, like 6 hours and a bit right now. What are you most excited about, man? What's the next big thing for you? You went through all the hard work, you went through all the criticism, you went through all of that. What's going on for you coming up now?
I think I don't know. I think the NFTs. Right. I want to see HEX stakes be on OpenSea.
I see what you mean.
Right.
Yeah, it's like people are gonna mint their tokens, and people provide liquidity and do all that stuff, and that's fine. Like I'm excited to see that too. But really seeing
so an actual NFT
on OpenSea, and someone's asking $1 million for one that they just made or something stupid.
Right.
It's that's what I want to see.
Now, I want to ask you something about specifically OpenSea and these NFT marketplaces. So we've seen some fuckery go on with these NFT marketplaces where they promote certain projects and hide certain other projects. I mean, OpenSea is an absolute mess. Let's say whatever NFT marketplace that Hadron is primarily being traded on, maybe attacks Hadron, maybe doesn't show the Hadron, NFTs. Do you have any plans to perhaps create a Hadron NFT marketplace? If you see traditional NFT marketplace starting to go after Hadron NFTs?
No expectations.
No expectations.
Others, but I know of one person who is currently working on something kind of along those lines, and I have no idea if that's going to pan out.
Mintra. You're talking about Mintra.
Actually, no. I think that's a different thing. They'll pan out. They're going to be a more of a generic thing, and they might make sense on Pulse. I don't know which marketplace makes the most sense on Pulse, but there is another team working on something specifically for Hedron. And I don't know how legitimate it is, so I'm not gonna say.
Hey man, are you in talks with anybody in the HEX community, prominent members at all? Have you made any connections within that field, I guess, of relationships? Okay, I see.
Yeah, I mean, it's here's the hard part, right? The only one I think I can bring up is probably Kinetics, because he's said on stream that he supports Hedron. All the other ones I can't say anything about because they're yeah, I love it, but I don't want to say anything right now.
Right.
Maybe in maybe a couple of weeks after launch.
Especially if a HEX, because man, there's a lot of maximalism out there in the HEX community, which I deeply find ironic because Richard himself has shown the ability to be a maximalist and then not, and then change his mind and do that several times over and learn to grow. So
Yeah, and like the recent FUD today that I have to deal with is I'm not gonna name the guy specifically, but he's been FUDing a lot.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and like it's just, you know, I can accept not liking the project. I can accept anyone not liking the project. There are certain things you probably shouldn't say. That's all I'm going to say about it. There's, you know, especially when you're talking about what the OA may or may not do. Like no one gets the right to the OA.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that in terms of the OA?
Well, one of the parts brought up is like, well, maybe the OA chooses to fork Hedron out of Pulse Chain, and they're kind of presenting it in a really dishonest way, saying like the OA is going to EES these people, where they're going to essentially fork. Pulse Chain's going to fork. They're going to cut Hedron out, and then cut all these people's stakes out, and give them what they would have gotten if they had emergency end staked instead of interacting with Hedron. And I cannot personally imagine the OA hurting Hexicans at all.
Could you imagine how many people that would alienate?
It would look horrible, in my opinion.
And
additionally, like, I just can't, like, the OA exists for the benefit of Hexicans. It's never done anything bad to us.
Right.
Like, I don't know, man. That seems a little far-fetched to me.
Right. Yeah. And look, man, I did want to ask you about this just because, you know, there's a lot of people, one person specifically, spreading a lot of FUD about Hadron. And, you know, I want to ask you about this. It's important. I think it's important that people hear your response. So I, you know, in fact, did listen to this person's criticism. I, in fact, wrote down, tried to summarize what the criticism is. So if you'd allow me to try my best to distill the criticism I've heard, because I think it's important that people hear from you, you know, the response or the rebuttal to these criticisms. So allow me to just kind of attempt to reiterate what I've heard. So, you know, there's the argument that if you fork the amount of T shares out in existence, you're detracting from the value proposition of HEX, where you're taking value out of HEX stakes early is similar to emergency end staking, interfering with the HEX buy pressure and HEX scarcity. What would you have to say to those people who are making those kinds of arguments?
You know, you can not like Hedron and you can think it will do bad things. I think that's fair, right? Because there's a lot of things that Hedron's going to do that none of us know what's ultimately going to happen with it. I don't see Hedron creating a massive amount of sell pressure. I don't see it stealing value from people's stakes. I think if you're someone who's going to sell a stake, you're someone who's going to emergency end stake it anyway, and someone else is going to get, you know, going to end up buying that stake, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe there's no buyer, and they emergency end stake anyways because they get fed up trying to wait on OpenSea. Like one of the ideas that you're just going to be immediately liquidating these stakes on OpenSea is probably not true. But who's going to want to buy a 6-month in 15-year stake? You just go make it yourself. You know, there's not a whole lot of reason to do that. So there's going to be a market process where we kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work, and that's going to determine what kind of value people can theoretically extract from their stake early. But you're not extracting any value directly out of your stake. You're just giving up some value that you would have had later. Like, that's a decision you're making in order to get out early. You're making this decision, hey, I went out early and I'm going to take this loss, and the other person gets the value. You know, I think you end up in a situation where there's more buy pressure for HEX, there's less sell pressure for HEX, and maybe if that's a little bit manipulative and you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to use it, and you're welcome to not like it. But I think there are things that we should, as a community, you know, say, hey, I don't like this. I think it's going to be not good, but we'll see where it goes. And if it is not good, no one will use it. That ultimately will be the end result for Hedron. If it does nothing but bad things, people just stop using it. Who wants to hurt their own bags?
Right.
It's true.
Yeah. Look, man, I appreciate you, you know, putting the thought into that response, because look, it's ultimately an interesting conversation. You know, there is the open question as to whether or not Hadron will detract or add to HEX. I think you've explained how you put in a lot of time and effort into crafting something that is likely to add to Hadron, although until things exist, until we see how things go, a lot of this conversation is theoretical. I can see how, philosophically speaking, Hadron allowing people to extract value early kind of juxtaposes with what Hex is all about, with delaying gratification. But I personally ultimately think, and as you have stated, that with all these features that Hadron allows, I think this allows more people to stake out 15-year, to create these long stakes that wouldn't have otherwise. And I think you've worked out some game theory that aims to make things where this adds more than it detracts. So, I mean, no, super interesting protocol. I can't wait to learn more. Can't wait to see how the mint goes, man. Yeah, super interesting.
Hey,
stuff.
man, I think it's gonna be cool to have Hex stake NFT. I think that's where there's a huge value proposition behind that. Whether we like it or not, the free market is gonna exist, man. That's with everything. So, to me, I understand, all the criticism. I understand all of that, and on this channel, we're pretty clear what our position is with everything when it comes to Hex. So there's nothing we can deny about that. But I think it's gonna be at one point be a cool thing to have the Hadron NFT in your wallet, and that's pretty much it. And there's an economy that's going to emerge from that. There's going to be some sort of equilibrium that's going to happen because of that. And whether we find some sort of value proposition behind that or no, that's the market. You don't know that. I don't know that. Brendan doesn't know that. No one knows what
I know everything.
What the market is what's gonna decide on all of that. But I think it's gonna be pretty cool, man, to see the HEX NFT. That's what it is.
Yeah,
it's pretty simple.
And a lot of NFT artists that are hexagons are like talking to me, and they're like, "Oh, I want to be able to like put my art on these stakes, right?" And so I'm kind of like working on a way maybe we could do that in the future.
That's pretty cool. And this is something I haven't heard you talk much about, which is, could you maybe explain a little bit more as to what the process is as of now for? Because I'm very curious. What are these Hex, NFT stakes on these marketplaces going to look like? Could you explain the process as to how you're thinking now as to how to brand these?
Yeah, if you want to find out, the NFT art is in the Telegram. You can it's t.me/Hedron crypto. Go there. People are spamming it like crazy. They really like it.
Right on.
So that's gonna be cool. But in the future, right, like all an NFT is a token that says, "Hey, go to this URL to find all the data on what I am," right? And that URL can be anything. So on that URL, you could change the picture. So if you wanted to have a curated collection of like hexagon art that came out of the hexagon community, and you could just pick whatever picture you want for your NFT that day, like, yeah, that could exist.
So as the owner of the encapsulated NFT stake, you can change the picture?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't exist now. I mean, but right now they will all be the same. But in the future, we could build that out, and you could just put whatever. I can't say whatever picture you want, right? Because there's some things I probably shouldn't let people upload to open.
Right. Okay.
You get the idea.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, something a little bit off topic here, but I think it's important to mention because I don't want to forget it. So if you want to mint some Hadron, you need to connect your wallet that you use to create Hex stakes. Now, a lot of people use the Staker app. Have you had any conversations with the Staker app people as to whether or not they're going to build out some interface that can connect to Hadron?
I think they have a wait and see approach.
Okay.
I will say that Staker app does use Gnosis as the backend, and we do have instructions in the Telegram on how you can take your private keys from Staker and essentially use Gnosis directly with Wallet Connect, and then you can use Hedron that way. And anything you do in Hedron is not going to show up in the Staker app. So you're going to have to know that those are going to be two different things you're using. But if you want to be able to do this stuff on your Staker stakes, you in theory can do it. It's just a bit of a process. So if that's you and you want to find out, the instructions to do that are in our Telegram. But I think in the future, like Staker's going to have to support Pulse Chain and a lot of tokens on Pulse Chain. I think we're going to get to a point where they at least have to have Wallet Connect support in their app. And I've talked with Steph a little bit about this, and it sounds like that might be a direction that they'll ultimately be going. But I just know they have a ton of work ahead of them trying to get Pulse Chain fork and all that kind of stuff working. So If as far as like native Hedron, I think they're wait and see. If they do decide to do it, you're probably looking at 6 months at least. So, but until then, we do have instructions you can use if you really want to do it.
I see.
There you go.
Okay, right on. Now, so just to, pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but just so it's said for the viewers. So Hadron will exist on Ethereum and Pulse Chain as well. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah, we're launching on Ethereum today, and then we'll be forked over to Pulse Chain when that fork happens.
Interesting. Do you think because of the time difference of when Pulse Chain will launch and people minting or not minting Hadron, do you think there will be a disparity in supply as to whether or not there'll be more supply on the Ethereum side or Pulse Chain side, or do you anticipate it'll be the same?
I have no. That's so hard to say. It depends on how long it takes the Pulse Chain to come out.
Right. Any thoughts on that?
It could be like I think testnet v3 is ready. I think it's ready to rock and roll. I think they're just waiting on today to end for the sacrifice balances. So I would not be surprised if we see in 2 or 3 days testnet v3. And if
that would be very nice.
Out, like how long? The question then is like how long does testnet v3 have to exist before we're comfortable launching mainnet? And I'm going to say it's probably at least 2 weeks. So somewhere between 2 weeks and a month. Like unless there's issues. If there's issues, longer. But if there are no issues with testnet v3, between 2 weeks and a month, and I could conceivably see it happening.
Right on. So is there anything else Hadron needs to do in the meanwhile? Are you guys waiting on testnet version 3 to kind of finalize the Hadron protocol? Is everything pretty much wrapped up? What is the Hadron development look like from now until Pulse Chain launch?
Oh, the contract's done. It's launching complete full on Ethereum. So you're going to have minting, borrowing, tradable stakes, all of that in about 6 hours.
Okay.
So, and then that's going to get forked to Pulse Chain. And we've had testnet running on testnet v2 for Pulse Chain for like the past 2 months. People have been using that, bidding on liquidations, making NFTs, doing all the stuff. It's been working great there. So I'm excited for it. We're ready to go.
There you go, man. We're all excited for it as well, man. You just went through a good round of technical questions and stuff that the community's been asking. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your work. We definitely see the chats are also positive as well. And good luck with everything, man. I think you got something going on, and that's what happens with all these different projects. As soon as first time launching, there's a lot of criticism until the utility proves itself. Right, and that's what we're all waiting on right now, man. So pretty amazing to see, and we hope everything just works out well, man. We're all excited. 6 hours. I'm probably gonna put a NFT stake, excess stake.
That's awesome.
So there you go, man. So yeah, man, amazing to see.
So hold on, this is breaking news. Let it be known that it was Alex and Hadron that got messed in the stake, because this guy doesn't.
Hey man, don't get me all excited now, man. I know everybody's gonna hate me now in the HEX community, but look, man, innovation is like that. That's what it is.
Man, look, and for all the haters, let them know, Alex. Hey, you got messing to open up
Alex,
the HEX stake. This guy has some HEX, but he doesn't stake it.
Alex, this is a revelation, man. You don't understand. But no, pretty happy to see it, man. And I think there's utility in everything, right? And the more the utility, the better. Whenever Pulse Chain comes out, there's a better utility. The market is gonna decide. No, we cannot decide. This is what DeFi is all about. This is what crypto is all about. No one's gatekeeping, and most importantly, we don't want to gatekeep ourselves from ourselves, right? So I think that's going to be pretty interesting times for you, man. And I'm pretty sure you're going to find some sort of economy within the HEX community as well. So pretty excited to see that.
Yeah,
I'm super excited. I think it's going to be a great time.
There you go.
Absolutely. So look, listen, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time explaining what Hadron's all about. If you got any final words, maybe now is the time to do it. If you want anyone to visit any kind of websites, plug all your stuff.
Even if you want to talk shit.
Now's the time.
I'm trying to hold back on that for a little bit for now.
No, hold on. Let's keep poking at them. Names.
But yeah, like t.me/Hedron Crypto, Telegram, tons of Hexicans in there. There's 50 people in voice chat right now. Hexicans you probably all already know are hanging out in there going over game theory and all sorts of crazy stuff. Hedron.pro is the website. You can get the white paper, audit, GitHub, our Uniswap front end fork that already has the Hedron token ready to rock and roll. All that's there. So yeah, those are really the two big ones. You can follow me on Twitter at Hedron Crypto.
There you go.
Awesome.
There you go. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for all the questions. Appreciate all your answers, man. Good luck with everything. We're excited. Definitely, this is the first time we're probably gonna get you sometime soon. Yeah, maybe just a quick wrap up in a couple of weeks and see what what happened, any market updates, and we'll see if all the rumors are true or no. If the OA is gonna do this or that, or it's gonna get I don't know. We'll see whatever happens, man. But it's pretty exciting to see.
We'll see.
Yeah.
So, folks, like and subscribe, hit the bell icon to notify new uploads. Check out all the links down in the description below. Alex, make sure to take a vacation at some point. We'll wrap it up here. Until next time.
100%, man. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you. Make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. Do whatever you got to do, man. Appreciate y'all.